Okay, we are going to begin now. Welcome to those of you who have just joined us. I'd like to formally begin our NCSS Leaders webinar. I'm Larry Pasca, the Executive Director of NCSS. Very pleased that you are joining us this evening for the final in our quarterly series for this year. And this recording will be posted on our YouTube channel, and it will be made available as a link through our advocacy toolkit. So if you do wish to revisit it or share it with colleagues who might not be able to join us this evening, we welcome you to do that. So we have a somewhat packed agenda this evening for our webinar. In just a few moments, we are going to hear from Brian Traxler, who is our 2017 House of Delegates Resolutions Chair. And Brian is going to be sharing with us an overview of the resolutions process going into this year. We have a couple of highlights that we want to share today in terms of the process for 2017 of getting our resolutions written and submitted to our House of Delegates at its annual meeting at our conference. But we also have several other updates, some of which we want to share first. And we'll also conclude this evening with some updates about the evolution of this leadership series as we move forward into the next school year. And our evolution of this series is actually through your request, as well as the hard work of our board of directors in finalizing our strategic plan going into next year. So I'm very excited to share where we are headed, and just look forward to a great hour together of partnership. So just as we begin, and why we focus tonight on resolutions. So traditionally at this time of the year, we've released some sort of training materials about the resolutions process. As you know, we treat resolutions as a very serious way for our members, our leadership, to advocate on issues that might be of significance to the social studies profession in the coming year. Things that you want our board of directors to focus on and advocate for, as well as our larger community of leaders like you. And so typically the Summer Leadership Institute, which is traditionally held in July, is a forum for that to happen. Last year, when I was actually resolutions chair, Anna Post on our team had recommended doing this webinar and kind of updating it as a way to share the resolutions process with members and encourage all of our membership to think about developing and sponsoring resolutions of their own. So a couple of changes that we've done up front for this year. First of all, our Summer Leadership Institute itself is taken on new life as the Summer Legislative Institute. And the focus on this is modeling what we see sister associations do for their members. It is, again, a 3-day event that is focused in part on advocacy on Capitol Hill, but also this year we're focusing a little more intensely on developing a toolkit for advocacy that can be used by our state and local members as they go back to states and work on advocating for social studies. So we're pleased to announce that our Summer Legislative Institute this year, if you're not aware, is going to be held at Discovery Education's World Headquarters in Silver Spring. It is going to begin Tuesday afternoon and conclude Thursday afternoon. And we are offering complimentary registration for this event for members of our board of directors, the immediate president or executive director of our affiliated councils, and our community committee chairs, as well as our associated group leaders. And we do recommend that any of you who have a leadership role in NCSS strongly consider registering. However, as you can see through the registration page here, we are opening up our registration to everyone. So members, non-members, the general public, we welcome all participants. We do have a limit of 50 people at this event due to space considerations. And if you know of folks who are not members of NCSS but wish to attend this event, they can get membership included in their registration price. This year, we are not able to subsidize any travel arrangements for participants. However, we wanted to direct focus on the fact that we are calling this 15 solid hours of professional development, and we know that that can be very important in terms of professional development credits in your state. So we do offer this as an experience, and I want to share this agenda with you because I'm really excited at the possibilities of what this 3-day event will look like this year. We do open our event with lunch, of course, so we hope you'll get there by 12:30 for lunch. If you're able to attend, we do have a presentation by Discovery Education on resources, digital resources that they have that support technology and civic learning. We will spend the later part of our afternoon focusing on how to prepare for a visit to Capitol Hill. Typically, these are visits that are prearranged by you in advance, so you will contact your representative or senator and try to make arrangements with their staff. And those of us who have attended in years past, some of us get direct FaceTime with our representatives in Congress. Some of us may meet their staffs or interns or fellows. But the experience itself is extremely positive in building the case for social studies and also connecting with your leaders, your elected leaders, on the issues that matter to you related to social studies. We are going to have time for a reception on that first evening to just allow our participants to get to know each other better. Our second day, you actually don't start in Silver Spring. You actually go right to Capitol Hill, and you have the entire morning to meet with your congressional leaders on Capitol Hill. We encourage you to take advantage of lunch out there while you're there. There's some street vendors and good places to relax. And then come back to Silver Spring, and at 2:30, we're going to have a brief panel with some of our leaders who have done state implementation planning for ESSA this year, and have also worked with us at NCSS on advocacy in their state. So we are often called upon by our state council leaders to write letters to state superintendents of instruction or state members of boards of education advocating for social studies and ESSA planning, or advocating just for additional face time or consideration of social studies in the instructional program, in the revision of learning standards, or in the assessment program. And so we want to hear from a few of our leaders that have engaged with us in the past year and how they've advocated for social studies at a state level. From there, we're going to turn everybody loose into small groups to focus on developing legislative advocacy toolkits for themselves. And on the third morning, Brian Traxler, whom you'll meet in just a moment, our resolutions chair, is going to give a deeper dive into the webinar that you're seeing this morning, and then participants would have a choice of doing one of three things: focusing more on their advocacy toolkit development, focusing on federal advocacy development with NCSS leadership, or working with Brian on developing resolutions. So we have a very packed agenda, and we do hope you join us there. And I do want to announce very briefly, our advocacy efforts have paid off recently. Congress had just appropriated funds, and President Trump had signed them into law effective March 5th. That brings back funding for some social studies programs. National programs under ESSA are authorized to focus on civics, geography, and history. Those were appropriated at a level just under half of what was authorized. However, we are encouraged that these programs did make it into the final budget. Congressional academies and presidential academies were two new programs created under ESSA that were focused on teacher preparation in social studies. Again, amounts that were funded under what was requested, so it was requested about $3.6 million total for both programs. The final appropriations were at $1.7 million, but again, social studies funding is on the map. We can work from this. And student success and academic enrichment grants, the SSAE grants, these are for competitive funds that can be used for multiple purposes. They're actually used to support a well-rounded education, and social studies fits within that definition of well-rounded, along with many other subjects and aspects of the school day. The original authorized amount was $1.6 billion. The appropriation was for $400 million. Again, we want to encourage you to take this information and start building the case locally for how social studies is beginning to become a priority again, however limited in scope, at a federal level, and encourage your work at a state and local level in ensuring that the focus and attention on social studies programming begins to happen. And again, please check out our website for more information on appropriations for 2017. So, speaking of the focus on social studies, we're very pleased that this year our Board of Directors formally approved 9 resolutions of the House of Delegates on these particular topics. And what I'm really excited to share with you about is that this year we're also encouraging all of the sponsors of these resolutions, as well as their co-sponsors, to consider developing professional learning opportunities for our membership and for the general public around these topics. So our colleague Victoria has already sent out requests to sponsors to think about developing a program around these. Again, purely voluntary, but we would definitely welcome training materials, instructional resources, blogs, articles, just content about these very critical topics. And what we're very pleased about for this year as well is the fact that our membership through the resolutions process has taken firm stands on all aspects that relate to our 10 themes, that relate to our C3 framework, and that relate to critical moments and issues currently in our profession. So I invite you again to look at this list and hopefully see the pride we feel in the voice that our members had and the pride that our own board of directors had in terms of the statements and the focus that we wanted to pay attention to in terms of advocacy for social studies this year. So the good news for all of you tonight on this call is that these resolutions that you see here could be yours. These are your words. They start from you. They start from ideas among your committees, your communities, your local councils, the associated groups you represent. These represent your ideas of what social studies education must be focused on in 2017. And so with that, we want to turn it over to Brian Traxler, who is our House of Delegates Resolutions Chair for this year, who's going to give us that crash course in trying to figure out, first of all, why we even do resolutions as an organization, how you generate them, how you think about writing them, and our timeline and focus going into our annual conference in November around them. Brian, welcome.
Well, thank you, Larry. And for those that are not familiar with me, my name is Brian Traxler, and I am from the Minnesota Council for the Social Studies. I was a president from 2013 to 2015. Prior to that, I was the chair in 2012 of the Government Relations Policy Relations Committee for NCSS. And right now, I'm currently serving kind of in a dual role, vice president for the Minnesota Council for the Social Studies, and I'll be entering my third year on the HOD House of Delegates Resolutions Committee, excuse me. And now I have the opportunity of serving chair, and I'm very excited. One of the visions I have for this year is this before I get into the overview is this being a visible person, helping people guide writing resolutions along the way, whether it's going to be for those that are going to be at SLI in July in DC, whether it's going to be in the discussion process in San Francisco in November, and in communicating via email as well. I hope to be someone that can be able to be ready to answer the questions, being able to answer those questions appropriately, but also keeping the different affiliates abreast in terms of what's going on. I'm going to walk you through a few slides. The first one is from the HOD manual that often gets revisited in the hall at NCSS conference time. Some of these I will read verbatim. Some of them I'll just summarize. But read the first one. Resolutions represents the principles, beliefs, and actions that the general membership of the NCSS, as represented in the House of Delegates, recommends to the NCSS Board of Directors. I've been a member of the House of Delegates for about 6 or 7 years now. Each year has different quirks, some different nuances, but one of the common bonds in general is trying to advocate for our discipline and trying to do it in the most effective way possible. Another piece to provide a voice for the membership to guide the NCSS Board of Directors in the following areas. So whether it's current or future NCSS board operations, social studies education as a whole, history and social science inquiry, relevant social and political issues, and courtesy and commendation. So what the process as a whole with resolutions is oftentimes resolution recommendations are either written by community groups, the associated groups, the affiliated councils, and the individual members. Often they're submitted to NCSS for consideration after they have been approved by the leadership of the authoring group. They're voted on at the House of Delegates. Usually it's been the Saturday of the NCSS annual conference. And then in the following spring, the resolutions that have been approved by the House body are discussed and considered by the NCSS Board of Directors. As a whole, resolutions do represent the voice of a group in NCSS and social studies education. And it is a great opportunity for local or state concerns to be brought up to the larger membership of NCSS. And it's also an appropriate means by which to model the democratic process in NCSS. I often tell my students that being a part of the House of Delegates is like a big kid's version of being on student council. And I'm a student council advisor myself, and at an all-girls school, no less. And sometimes they're not going to necessarily see things the same way at the beginning, but by hashing it out and agreeing to disagree, usually a lot of common ground is found. In some years, it's a bit more um, complex than others, but the one thing that binds all 50 states, regardless of what region of the country you're in, people want what's best for our discipline. And that has been something that the NCS leadership, whether it's the board of directors or um, the staff, have been trying so hard to advocate for and try just to keep our voice heard on a consistent basis. So when generating resolutions, there's three questions that usually people are encouraged to keep in mind. The first one, what are the significant issues that are worthy of NCSS attention or action at this time? And that's going to vary on a year-to-year basis. Second, what issues have an impact on social studies educators at the local and or state level? And this is a fascinating process to me. Being from the Midwest, sometimes you can easily be in your own cocoon or silo depending on what region of the country you're on. And it's a very gratifying and unique experience when you can hear the issues that are going on in California or what's going on in New York City or happening in Georgia or Florida. But regardless of the situation, you can usually find those little common threads that are happening in one region of the country that are going on in another. And sometimes councils can be far apart on issues, and that's okay. The process is to try to for the adults to model, but sometimes our politicians in the Capitol Hill area could sometimes do a little bit of a better job doing. Also, too, what are the current and future priorities of NCSS? Visioning process. And what NCSS has been able to put together in the last year or so is a strategic plan. And I'm going to toss it over to Larry for the moment to see what thoughts he has about it.
Thanks, Brian. So we're very proud of this strategic plan, and I want to just pose a challenging question for a moment, and that is, we traditionally define the social studies by a series of disciplines: civics, history, geography, economics, sociology, psychology, and I'm going to leave some out, so please don't be offended. So my challenging question is this: what if we didn't define social studies by a series of disciplines, but we defined all of our disciplines in common by a series of 5 priorities? And I think that's the challenge of our organization going forward. How do we define social studies not by silos, but by collaboration, by communication, by innovation, by inclusiveness, by influence and leadership? And so I share this today with you because when you go to our website and download our strategic plan, this doesn't show up very well on a slide. So please download the 2-pager on our website and take a look deeper. You'll see these 5 priorities and how our board of directors and our members and our volunteer leaders like you have prioritized the focus of NCSS for the next few years. And I think that focus is very deep. And I would encourage you, as you're going through the resolutions writing process this year, as you're taking advantage of leadership professional development through us and elsewhere, think about how are these 5 priorities a definition for our discipline. And I'll leave it at that, and I welcome some thoughts on that question as we kind of go along, especially through the conference this year, and really unpack this plan together. And Brian?
So to kind of circle back with the generating resolutions piece, and if I were to sit down with a state affiliate council, these would be the first 5 questions that I would present to a state council's executive committee. So what recommendations can be offered to support NCSS and its membership? And those ideas are going to vary. But putting it in writing and putting those thoughts out there is definitely a start in the right direction. The second question: how can the actions of NCSS improve the teaching and learning of social studies? What I really think of that too is I teach AP US history, and I've been through the redesign for 3 years, and I'm also a civics teacher as well, and I do integrate as much of the C3 framework as I can in in my own course teachings. But also at the same time, too, is each state has different standards. And the recommended framework and state standards and AP standards, sometimes they're gonna overlap beautifully, and sometimes there's gonna be some challenges with that. And oftentimes some of the better resolutions I've seen is how do you address some of those challenges from a position of strength? Are there issues in my state or special interest group that are not addressed? Again, that's going to vary per region. Are there issues that NCSS is not effectively addressing that need more or different action? Okay. And what do my constituents, either whether it's state, committee, or affiliated group members, feel is important to social studies education? So when writing a resolution, there's going to be a sample later on that you'll see, so you kind of see all these different moving parts come together. But oftentimes when you write a resolution, you need a title. And it should be as concise but accurate as possible to the best fit the description of one's resolution. What's the subject of the resolution? What is it going to be generic? Is it going to be more specific? Is it going to be advocacy related? Is it going to be related to ESSA? Is it going to be related to an issue that's been nagging the country at this time? I've seen some that have been related to civil rights, whether it's with race or with gender, or even with or with how to deal with specific subject matter that is taught in the classroom. And then for part B, list resolution sponsors and co-sponsors. So the sponsors is the specific group that creates the resolution. For states or affiliate groups that are going to be coming to DC in July, there's going to be an opportunity for the potential for two states to write a resolution together. Then later on in the process, oftentimes in early fall, each of the states then can have the opportunity to become a co-sponsor, which they didn't necessarily contribute to the writing of the resolution, but they agree with it and they full-heartedly endorse it. The second piece, the rationale, trying to identify that perceived need and stating the case for the adoption of the resolution. Oftentimes it keeps it short, generally no more than a single sentence. Basically, it's trying to get what's the point that you're trying to communicate. Oftentimes people in the HOD membership don't necessarily read these resolutions till within maybe a week at most. But sometimes I remember early on in my HOD days, I wasn't really looking at these till I got to the conference itself. So sometimes seeing that quick snapshot sentence is very important. So, okay, I know what the resolution is asking. Then I need to go deeper to learn more and understand it. So if I want to get involved potentially in the discussion, you can definitely do so from a position of strength. So with the preambulatory clauses, or the also known as the whereas, you try to create a background, a basis for this resolution, giving a brief history of it, and possibly including mention of previous resolutions. In a lot of ways, it's like being a teacher. You're trying to educate a group on the issue itself and trying to keep the education piece to no more than 5 or 6 clauses. It can be positive, it can also be negative in tone, but it also, most importantly, it should be factual and not just opinion or conjecture. So some useful preambulatory clause openings, and I'm just going to pause for a minute and let you take a look at it on your own. Some, depending on the subject matter, some are going to be more fitting than others, but you're not necessarily pigeonholed either in terms of what specific language you specifically have to use. And then the operative clauses, the be it resolved piece of the resolution. Calling for some type of action as the main part of a resolution. You state the purpose of the resolution, especially expressions of collective sentiments. And a lot of it is, too, just to promote some civil and civic discussion through careful wording rather than acrimony engendered by poor wording and or political disagreement. The purpose of these resolutions is to bring the body together and bring the social studies discipline together. So even if you may look at it at parts of the resolution differently, this when it gets presented on the floor at the NCSS conference, that's going to be the opportunity where differences can be aired out, but also too trying to find that common ground and trying to move the resolution together that's in the best interest of all the stakeholders. Again, similar to the preambulatory clauses, here are some useful operative clause verbs, similar to the slide a couple prior. I'm just going to give you a second to peruse them for food for thought. So some notes related to writing a resolution. So in the preambulatory clause, discuss the topic or issues, history, and other current issues regarding it. Refer to previous NCSS actions and or resolutions on the topic when possible. In the operative clauses, include phrases that seek to solve the problem rather than just make statements. Avoid inflammatory language. Get your group's position articulated and adopted without criticizing opposing groups. Take into account the views of other groups whenever possible. Write the resolution from a social studies point of view, not just in glittering generalities. If necessary or appropriate, refer issues to already existing bodies. For example, avoid creating new bodies or entities. And the last piece is avoid duplicating existing NCSS resolutions and ongoing activities on an issue. A little bit of a checklist. This when a group's writing a resolution, how effective is the purpose of the resolution articulated? Is the resolution clearly and concisely worded? Does the resolution follow the appropriate format? For example, rationale and statement of action, statement relating to goals and purposes of NCSS, statement relating to professional interests of NCSS. Is the resolution thoughtful and purposeful? How does the resolution connect and extend the current priorities of the NCSS strategic plan? How's this or a similar resolution been considered before? And does the resolution represent the interests of my constituent group? So in front of you is a resolution, a sample resolution that you would hypothetically see at House of Delegates at the NCSS conference. And this one deals with NCSS to encourage and support the establishments of legislative liaisons at the affiliate levels by providing training at a national conference. And you see who the sponsors are. You have the co-sponsors, and then you go into the rationale, which is a couple sentences long there, a couple whereas, and then one be it resolved. And before I move forward, I'll give you a minute to take a look at it. Some reminders. Each resolution will be reviewed, edited, and numbered by the NCSS House of Delegates Resolutions Committee. As my role on the HOD Resolutions Committee, my job is to help our group clean it, not to change it. And there are currently 9 members on the HOD Resolutions Committee. We meet usually the day before the conference begins in San Francisco. We'll communicate via email prior to that time. And then there'll also be some hearings too that'll be set aside on the Friday of the conference in case there's any questions or people or clarifications are needed with the position statements with the resolution. Finalized resolutions will be introduced in the House of Delegates at the NCSS annual conference. And then, as I alluded to earlier, resolutions passed by the HOD will be reviewed by the NCSS Board of Directors the following spring. Feasibility of implementation will be determined at that time. So one thing to keep in mind is what challenges are your constituent groups facing in resolutions writing? And through the course of the coming year, that is something I do want to learn more about in this whole process. Where each state stands for with it. Here's a sample possible model. This is a little bit. I'll share what Minnesota does in a second, but one possibility you could do is establish a resolution committee chair and a standing resolution committee at your state affiliate level or your community level. Issue a call for resolutions to your member per timelines you set. Keep in mind the NCSS resolutions timeline. That specific timeline will be forthcoming later on this spring. Your resolution committee may write, edit, and amend submitted resolutions. Your resolution committee could submit edited resolutions to the council's officers and executive board for a vote prior to submission to NCSS. And also, two, is the resolutions committee reads, evaluates, and recommends resolutions for co-sponsorship to the council's executive board or prior to co-sponsorship. I'll share what Minnesota does. Minnesota doesn't have an executive board per se. We have a president, we have a past president, vice president, secretary, and treasurer. We tend to float ideas within each other when the opportunity presents itself, but then we will bring it up at an open Minnesota board meeting in the summertime in terms of, is there anything that's concerning to you? Or we often our board sends two folks to SLI every summer, and then they'll come back with some possibilities in terms of resolutions that were developed in the July retreat, and we discuss that at the board level in August, and we either vote yay or nay whether we want to be a part of the process. And if there was co-sponsorship involved with another state, we have gone back and communicated with whether it's Wisconsin or California, that, hey, we're on board with this, or no, there's some reservations, but maybe at a later time. So there's definitely more than one way you can go about and do this. This is not a letter of the law type of model, just to keep in mind. Just to go a little bit forward, if it's approved by your state president, if you're acting approval by the president acting alone while at the NCSS annual conference, approval by the council's appointed HOD delegates while at the NCSS annual conference acting on caucus, approval by the full council board, particularly at their fall meeting, and also approval by council officers if the resolution is received after the fall board meeting but before the NCSS annual conference. Again, it's going to vary per group and per state. If you want to try to get a hold of me, is my email address. I check my email every day. I see it on the computer. I have a smartphone, so I am accessible through that. And also below is Larry's email and Anna's email. And before I just want to proceed and turn it back over to Larry, I just wanted to thank you for your time. I hope I've covered everything introductorily sufficiently, and I just look forward to meeting all of you either via email, in person in DC, or in San Francisco during the upcoming year. Larry, it's all yours.
Brian, thank you very much. I really appreciate you taking the time tonight to walk us through this overview. And As you've been speaking, and a few of us have just put some random thoughts in the chat box, so I invite all of us just to kind of scroll up and take a look at some of those comments that have been expressed. I think one of the things that's emerged through this is how do you take this model of resolutions writing and offer it really as training for advocacy in general. So I love the notion, Karen and Rachel and Peggy, and those of us have been talking about, the idea of how do we engage our students in this process, and not resolutions writing for NCSS, just the notion of what does it take to write a resolution? What does it mean when you resolve to do something, and how do you get a body to, a lawmaking body to consider it? Those are really critical questions. So we hope, again, that this process for this year, but more importantly in general, becomes a tool for our advocacy efforts for social studies. What I'm pleased to share with you now is a couple of things that some of these are new, and some of these are just trying to refresh and reinforce what we're planning to do for the rest of this year to support you, our volunteer leadership groups. So as an outgrowth of last year's initial meetings that I had with our community and committee chairs, and I again really appreciate those of you that were at the DC conference and could take a moment out of your hectic schedules to just meet me and say hi. We decided to host a leaders roundtable in San Francisco this year. So that will be on Thursday, November 16th, the day before our full conference begins. And we have scheduled time for about 6 hours in the day, and this meeting is for all of our community and committee chairs and vice chairs, our affiliated council presidents or their designees, and our associated group chairs or their designees. Now, we recognize that CUFA and NSSA are going on at this time, so I know it's going to be hard for group leaders of these groups to attend, but I do want to encourage you that if you have a member or someone that may want to represent your associated group during that time, even if it's to pop in for an hour or two and just interact with everyone else there, we certainly understand the competing demands on your time at our conference. The agenda is the same as we shared last time. Our goal in the morning, and Terry Cherry, our president-elect, will be there on hand with me, I believe, for a portion, or if not all of this event. We plan to do together a SWOT analysis of our membership groups. So what are the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats to the work that we're doing as volunteer leaders in the groups that we lead? If you've not done a SWOT analysis before, they can be very insightful, and we also wanted to use it as a way to just build some references together that are shared as we move forward throughout the day. We also want to take a deep dive into our strategic plan implementation and talk about the actions that the organization is focused on in the coming year to implement the strategic plan. And most importantly, to figure out, as a volunteer leader and as a volunteer leadership group in our organization, what are the strengths, the opportunities, the challenges that you and your group may bring to our work with the strategic plan. We'd like to talk about, for about a few hours in the middle of the session, professional development to support your advocacy efforts, and then spend the last part of the afternoon deep diving into the strategic plan itself and what the role is that you as leadership groups will play. How do we increase your community's memberships? How do we build your group's support among these 5 identified priorities? This event cannot happen without you, and we are now calling for facilitators to ensure that portions of this agenda that may be strengths of yours, if you've done SWOT analyses before, if you've unpacked the strategic plan before and you feel very comfortable in talking about it with your community members or other group members, we welcome you to consider being a facilitator at any portion during this day. Please just reach out to me so that we can facilitate, so that we can bring you into our planning for this impactful day. And again, I know I'm just going back for a moment. I know it's difficult to try to get to the conference a day early if you traditionally plan to come Friday to Sunday. But on behalf of the Conference Planning Committee, we would encourage you to try to come for the full experience, November 15th through the 19th. When our associated group meets, when our clinics meet, we have special events going on. We truly have a 5-day celebration of social studies and professional learning to meet all of your professional learning needs. So a big new structural change, and this is directly out of our strategic plan actions for the coming year, is the request to take these convenings, which we started this year as a pilot. So the idea of having a quarterly leaders webinar where you came for different topics and a chance to keep up to date with issues that are most critical for social studies and for leadership within the council, we decided to take it to the next level. So starting this fall, we are introducing what are called leadership forums. These are going to be monthly webinars that are tailored specifically to our leadership groups like you. They are going to be group topics that are selected by you based on emerging issues and trends in our profession that you would like to focus on together. And these would also be issues and trends related back to our strategic plan. Get them on your calendar now. The third Monday of each month starting in September is when we plan to host these, just like tonight, 8 to 9 p.m. Eastern Time. And we've already identified a schedule that we will be releasing to the public soon. Our 2017-18 schedule, September, December, March, and May, our quarterly webinars are going to be these. These will be quarterly webinars for all of our leadership groups at NCSS. September, January, and April, the webinars are going to be tailored to our associated group leaderships. So these would be issues on structuring and supporting our 4 main associated groups and some of the challenges and issues that they're facing in the work that they're doing, and a time for shared conversation among their group leaders. October, February, and May, we will invite our affiliated council leaders to come together for some deep diving, sharing, professional development together over this webinar. Again, topics to be selected in part from the express needs that they have. December, March, and June, we will target our webinars specifically for our community and committee chairs and vice chairs for the same purpose. Again, shared professional learning on issues that are most important to our leaders in those positions. So we will, again, post these dates soon. We will share a much more detailed series of announcements about these, calling for volunteer leaders, and excuse me, I jumped ahead for a second, calling for volunteer leaders for these webinars and helping us to shape a robust PD agenda. Our thought is, we know you're stressed for time. We know there's so much going on in the day. If you take 1 hour out of your month for yourself and focus on the possibilities of your leadership role within the council, we think that these would be very impactful opportunities. And we also hope that it helps you to expand your network of colleagues that you can rely on across the country. I think it's one of the strongest benefits of your council membership, and I do hope all of you get the chance to take advantage of it in part through this new structure of leadership forums that we have created. And lastly, our council leaders may have received an affiliation form recently. I know our community chairs received their affiliation renewal forms earlier this year. This year, you may have noticed a slight tweaking. We have brought down our 7 affiliation forms down to 1. We took a challenge on our team to consolidate them into something you could complete in 15 minutes, and I hope we've done that for you. Victoria and I certainly welcome your feedback both on the affiliation form and the affiliation forms themselves. So please feel free to submit those. We want to make sure that your state or local council is affiliated with NCSS and has all of the benefits of affiliation with the National Council at your disposal. We are starting to work right now on scheduling and noting for our members state events around the country. So please, if you haven't shared information on social studies events, whether you are a state council, a community, or an associated group, please make sure to share those with Victoria soon so that we can keep our list on our website up to date. And with that, we actually, Brian, thanks. We did a great job together tonight. We actually are ending about 12 minutes early. So what we will open this up for at this time is in our remaining 10 minutes, if you do have specific questions or comments, please feel free to use the chat feature. We can stay on the line for the next 10 minutes to answer any questions or have a discussion with you. You can also, I believe, use the raise your hand feature if you would like, if you are connected to speakers. If you'd like to ask any questions. Otherwise, again, please feel free to reach out anytime by email, follow us on Twitter and social media in general. And I do also welcome your feedback directly to me by phone or email on these webinars this year. If you've participated in more than one, your feedback on them, how useful they've been to you, and your suggestions for improving them as we move them into this leadership forum structure for next year. We simply want to make sure that these are meeting your needs. So with that, we will kind of leave the space open for any questions or comments either by microphone or on text box that you have. And if you have no questions, this formally concludes our webinar. and we very much appreciate your participation on behalf of our whole team at NCSS. Thank you.